So, one thing you can do is keep cozy and warm inside the Westminster United Church and watch pianist Marc-Andre Hamelin. He is in town to perform as part of the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra concerts. He's a Winnipeg favorite and world-renowned pianist, and he's in the studio this morning to have a conversation. Good morning.
Good morning.
Pleasure to have you back.
Bright and early.
I think it's been a bright and early. Yeah, I know. It's been a couple of years, I think, since I've had you here in the studio.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
So welcome back.
Thank you.
So tell us, before we get into the concert, what's been happening? What have you been up to? I know you've been doing some recording and some touring.
There's quite a few CDs that have come out. The latest one actually is devoted to Stravinsky, and it's a 2-piano CD with my colleague Leif Ove Ansnes, who will need absolutely no introduction to listeners. Many years ago, back in 2008, he invited me to his chamber music festival, and immediately I suggested, he wanted to do something with 2 pianos, and I immediately suggested The Rite of Spring of Stravinsky. And at the time, he wasn't familiar with Stravinsky's arrangement of it, but he quickly became fascinated, and we actually played it a fair amount of times. And last year, a tour was organized around an actual CD recording. We did the recording in Berlin in a wonderful studio, and I'm happy to say that the recording already seems to be successful, and it's only been out maybe 3 or 4 weeks.
Well, I mean, 2 preeminent pianists, right, getting together to perform this just wild work. It's got so much energy to it. How fun was it recording that with him?
It was a blast. It was a blast. I mean, we spent a great deal of time on it. It wasn't only that. It was also the concerto for 2 solo pianos of Stravinsky and 3 shorter pieces. But I remember, I think The Rite of Spring is the what we started with in the session, and then at the end of the session, when everything was done, we ran The Rite of Spring one more time, and I remember at the end how I felt at the end of that run through. I just felt at the time that it was one of the best things that I'd ever done, and it was so fulfilling, and it had a freedom and it had a savagery to it that I'm sure that a lot of the material that ended up on the CD is from that particular performance, that last run through. Because of course, CDs are edited. I mean, that's no secret, or it shouldn't be secret. We just want to get the best possible music, and so we get a little bit from everywhere. But I think that's partly why the performance is, to my mind, and I think to Leif Ove's mind, also so exciting.
So have you recorded lots with another pianist for the 4 hands, or is this something you haven't done in a long time?
This is actually the first time.
I didn't think. I mean, you've done a lot of solo. You've done, of course, with orchestra. So the very first time you've recorded with another pianist.
Yeah.
So what were the different challenges with doing that as opposed to?
Well, as opposed to chamber music, for example. Well, if you play with strings, or even with winds, of course, ensemble is a very important consideration, but string attack and to a certain extent wind attack is not as difficult to be absolutely together with. With another pianist, it's absolutely unforgiving because everything has to be super, super together and cleanly. Otherwise, it just sounds sort of peg-legged, I guess. And it didn't take a lot of time for Leif Ove and I to get used to each other, I'm happy to say.
How do you compare your styles? I mean, are there 2 different styles coming together in terms of your background and your training, or?
I wouldn't look at it that way. I really think that both of us really went to the music, and we channeled our energies towards making the music speak and getting the most out of the music. And we're certainly not there to show ourselves or to better each other. That would be
the battle of the egos wouldn't work on the
piano. No, that's silly, and that's for sports shows. We're not interested in that. Yeah. We really we're passionate about this particular arrangement of The Rite of Spring, and also the other works on the program, because the concerto for 2 solo pianos, which is the other major work on the CD, is it was a very delightful discovery for me. I think he knew it a little bit more than I did beforehand, but I quickly took to it, and it's not easy listening. I would concede that, but there's many riches in there, certainly.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about discovery for a second. One of the things you've become known for is, you can play a lot of this, the well-known war horses, but then also discovering new music. What is your process for discovering new music? Do people come to you and say, "Hey, you got to check this piece out," or
sometimes,
is it something?
Sometimes, I discovered either by myself or with other people's help.
Mm-hmm.
People send me scores all the time. There's a friend I have who is a retired school teacher who has been putting together a PDF archive of rare piano sheet music, and so far he has over like 52,000 items.
So you need to clone yourself a few more times to catch up to that.
Well, I mean,
wow.
a lot of it is junk. I mean, he does that really to be comprehensive,
Yeah.
but he doesn't claim that everything is a masterpiece by far.
Mm-hmm.
But it's good to have it as a library. And to me, it offers a great deal of education, because I get to find out more what was done in the 19th century and the and the beginning of the 20th, because that's where most of his collection lies.
Mm-hmm. I'm in a conversation with pianist Marc-Andre Hamelin, who's in to perform. I was going to say with the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra, but I should say as part of their concert series.
It's for the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra.
It's for them, yeah. Well, and for us too. For the Winnipeg audience, is a solo performance. I wanted to talk about the program that you've put together. What was your thought when you went into programming the list? And you've got Debussy, Godowsky, and then there's probably the least known, I would say, the composer's Samuel Feinberg.
Yeah. Well, this program actually was specifically put together for a Carnegie Hall recital that I did in November of last year.
Mm-hmm.
And Carnegie Hall is rather cautious and careful as far as getting bums on seats, and they really wanted to show me to my best advantage, or so they what they thought was my best advantage. I made a few suggestions. I mean, they wouldn't have come up with Feinberg on their own. I mean, that was me. But since I have somewhat of a reputation for Liszt's works, they were more than happy to admit Liszt.
Mm-hmm.
And to a certain extent, Godowsky, and the Strauss-Godowsky paraphrase is, it may be an acquired taste, but it's still a very fascinating thing to listen to. And Debussy has always been one of my favorites, so there you go. As far as Samuel Feinberg's music, he is mostly remembered now in Russia as a pedagogue and as a pianist. He left us quite a few recordings, including a very fascinating one of the whole of the Bach Well-Tempered Clavier, which is very, very much worth listening to. It's one of the most interesting, if not the most interesting I've ever heard, and I'm not mincing words here.
Yeah.
But as a composer, and he was really rather active in that regard, he is very, very little known. And it should be said that for most of the 20th century, in the West, the music just wasn't available. The printed music. Now, almost everything is on IMSLP on the internet. You can get it with a couple of clicks, and there you are. But back then, and that was when I sort of became interested in at least collecting the music. Back then, I didn't do anything with it. I just looked at it, and but it was only until recently that I thought, this may need some, a push.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And as strange as some of it may seem, and some of it is a little gnarly. There's some Scriabin influence there, but mostly after a while, and as Feinberg progressed, he really became he had his own voice, and he became completely himself. And I think that's really, really fascinating. His language was only his own and no one else's.
Mm-hmm. So there's kind of virtuoso in all these different pieces, right? I mean, the Debussy, Godowsky, Feinberg, I suppose, and
well, we could. It would be outside the scope of this program to go into the virtuoso question. To me, virtuoso. I mean, the word virtuoso in its purest sense is actually a compliment. For many, it's just it denotes kind of a keyboard athlete and nothing more.
Yeah.
But it's a great deal more than that. A virtuoso really entails a complete control, a heightened control of all aspects of your art, of the art of piano playing, not just the physical, but the mental and the emotional.
So we've got to be careful how we use that, just like a prodigy, child prodigy. We tend to use
well,
that.
compare it to any visual artist. I mean, when one should never talk about the control of the line. It should be, what's the word? It should be implicit. I mean, the line is there to create a response. It's not just for us to admire how he did that line, how he controlled that line.
Yeah, no, I believe that too. I buy into that for sure. Marc-Andre Hamelin is performing tonight, and he's also doing an hour concert tomorrow. He's going to be doing a selection of the pieces from tonight's concert at the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra. You can go to the mco.ca. So between touring and recording, you find time to have a bit of a life outside of that stuff. Anything? What do you enjoy doing when you have some time off?
Well, I
mean, obviously spending time with your wife.
Of course, I mean, that's always.
She's listening to that, so of course.
yes, she is, and she's also a radio announcer and producer in Boston. Yes,
cool.
And we spend as much time as we can together, But it's sometimes it's hard to carve it in, but we do our best.
Well, I'm glad you took some time out to come in this morning, and welcome back to Winnipeg. It's always a pleasure to have you in town.
Thank you very much.
Look forward to your concert
it's great
tonight.
to be here.
Pianist Marc-Andre Hamelin, he'll be performing tonight, Manitoba Chamber Orchestra, and tomorrow as well for an afternoon. Great way to spend an afternoon, an hour with Marc-Andre Hamelin at the Westminster Church. Get that right. TheMCO.ca is where you can get information and tickets.